So before we look at actually solving some problems, we need to talk about how to do that. And so this is the process that I recommend and encourage you to go through because it's going to help you out in the long run. So before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that it may seem trivial, it may seem unnecessary, it may seem cumbersome to go through this entire problem-solving process. But it's all but essential for the more challenging questions, and you need to establish your habit or your habits now. And this is speaking from experience. It doesn't have to be this exact problem-solving method, but something that is quite rigorous like this. Speaking from experience, having done university-level work, having taken an AP Physics class in high school, starting off with a good habit is helpful because you will absolutely need to use a lot of these strategies and techniques later on, and not trying to just jump straight to an answer is going to save you a lot of headache and difficulty of you making mistakes and not being able to catch them easily. So that problem-solving method is as follows. First, describe the action in the problem. So basically, sometimes there's a giant paragraph of text, and this is just a matter of saying, like, what's actually happening here? It might tell you all this stuff, and then what's really happening is a ball falls off of a window and bounces once. So just being able to describe that so you have in your head, here's what happens. That's what you want to go for. And that will help you with the second step, which is to sketch the situation and label it thoroughly. I'll show you examples of this later. But this step right here is huge. If you're skipping your sketches or if you're not labeling them thoroughly, you're handicapping yourself in a huge way. This right here is basically one of the most useful strategies in solving physics problems because a good sketch should, in theory, be able to replace the entire text of a problem. And it's something you can look at once you get good at looking at sketches and know exactly what's happening and actually be able to solve a lot of problems that you wouldn't have been able to solve just from reading the text. Next, identify and list all relevant equations. So just kind of look through the equation sheet, look through your notes, think back in your memory depending on what you're allowed to have with you at any given moment. And just write out those equations as is. Don't plug anything in, just write them out as is. This is also kind of a test-taking strategy because on the AP test, there are often problems on the free response where you get a point for just having the right equation there. So if you write those out at the start, it's potentially, essentially free points there. Next, isolate the target variable. So in other words, solve for the variable. Don't plug anything in yet, but you should have something like x equals blah, 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 or v equals blah, 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 or t equals whatever, or t naught equals whatever. There should be nothing plugged in yet as far as numbers. So it should be just working with the equations, just algebraic manipulation, your variable isolated by itself. Next, you'll actually substitute in. So you'll notice it's not until all the way down here that we actually put numbers into equations. That is intentional. That is something that will be the trickiest for some of you to pick up on quickly, but it's the biggest advantage you can have long term is getting used to doing most of your work without plugging things in. Next, simplify and present your answer. So you'll have this equation over here with all that stuff plugged in, all these random numbers. Simplify it down, get your final answer basically. Then lastly, check your units, the magnitude of your answer, and the direction if relevant. Just see if your answer makes sense. If you were asked to find a time and you ended up with meters, you probably made a mistake. So that's the goal here at the end, is just to double check to make sure your answer seems possible.